Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And as always, I am your host, Jesse Tapia. Alright, here we are. It is Wednesday I think it is? I get the days mixed up all the time now. Either way, one more week till football. Well, a week and a day. But we have some notable news to talk about. We got Dez Bryant, John Dorsey, Browns GM, seems to be interested in bringing the receiver to his team. I like it. We'll be talking about that for the first segment. You got Aaron Donald, who is now holding out. We will be talking about that. Yesterday we were talking about Todd Gurley holding out and all that, but nonetheless now we're going to talk from this point of view, talking about Aaron Donald. Third segment, I want to talk about Andrew Luck. He'll be back. And then the fourth segment, we'll be talking about, let's talk about America's team. Let's talk about the Cowboys. They got Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott. But are they going to make any noise this season? I'll let you know in the fourth segment. So that's how today's show is going to go. So let's just get it started with Dez Bryant. Dez Bryant is a bit of a... he's had an odd career, I guess you could say. I mean, there was a point where he was one of the best receivers in the league. And that feels like it was 10 years ago. When in reality, I mean, it was as close as 2014, which was 4 years ago. So it's been a while. Looking at his career, was drafted in 2010. Only started 2 games that season. Had 45 receptions for 561 yards and 6 touchdowns. 2011, he ends up starting 13 games. 63 receptions, 928 yards, 9 touchdowns. 2012, he actually plays in all 16 games that season. Starts 14 of them, had 92 receptions for nearly 1,400 yards and 12 touchdowns. 2013, he starts all 16 games. 93 receptions, 1,200 yards, 13 touchdowns. And then, I guess what you could say was probably his best year in 2014. 88 receptions, 1,300 yards, 16 touchdowns. 2015, he ends up getting hurt, only plays 9 games that season. 2016, Dak Prescott takes over as a starting quarterback. Dez only goes for 50 receptions, 796 yards, 8 touchdowns, makes the Pro Bowl. This is why the Pro Bowl means absolutely nothing as far as when you're talking about who's a better player or whatever. I mean, yeah, if you're ever in an argument and someone brings up, well, so-and-so has played in this many Pro Bowls, don't continue on with the argument for me, please. I mean, fans voting for players is a popularity contest. The Pro Bowl means absolutely nothing. The NBA All-Star game means nothing. NHL All-Star thing means nothing. MLB All-Star means nothing as far as how good of a player you are. All right. And then 2017, his last season with Dallas, 69 receptions, 838 yards, 6 touchdowns. Obviously, a long way away from those 1,000-yard seasons. I think that Dez ended up having to leave Dallas because of the fact that, I mean, it just wasn't going to work out going forward. Dez Bryant, as good as he was no longer the focal point of that offense. It was Ezekiel Elliott. And plus, when Tony Romo was his quarterback, Tony Romo had no problem taking chances. Tony Romo had no problem throwing the ball up in the air and hoping Dez Bryant would come down with it. Dak Prescott isn't that kind of quarterback. Dak Prescott is going to make the right decisions and pretty much be cautious the entire time. He's Alex Smith 2.0, as I like to call him. Dak Prescott, I don't think his deep ball is great. I think he's more of a dink and duck type of quarterback. And obviously that's not going to work out for Dez Bryant because that's not the type of receiver he is. I mean, you look at Dallas right now, who we're going to be talking about in the fourth segment, they got a bunch of number 2 receivers on their team. Allen Hurns, number 2 receiver. Cole Beasley is a slot guy. Terrence Williams, I mean, honestly, he's just been that guy who stands opposite of Dez Bryant. I mean, now he's going to be standing opposite either Michael Gallup or Allen Hurns, but Terrence Williams hasn't really ever done much. And now, with Dez Bryant being a free agent, John Dorsey's interested. The Browns, I don't think, have a real need at wide receiver right now. But either way, with Josh Gordon missing the beginning of training camp, not sure when he's coming back, it does make sense to at least kick the tires on Dez Bryant and see if he'd be a solid fit for that team. I mean, looking at them right now, they got Gordon, Landry, Coleman, Callaway, and I believe Ricardo Lewis is injured right now and going to be missing some time. And if you bring on Dez Bryant, someone's got to see the bench, and I'm assuming that's Corey Coleman. And I think Corey Coleman could be a very good number 2 receiver in this on this team, or at least in the league. But if you bring on Dez Bryant, obviously you're going to have to start him. And I think if you do that and you move Corey Coleman to the bench and he's your 4th receiver, you got to trade him, I think. I mean, Corey Coleman, he's good. You'll get something for him. The Browns have done well over the years to obtain draft picks, and another one wouldn't hurt you. But there is a point of, if they're bringing Dez Bryant on, chances are it's going to be on a 1-year deal, so I guess, yeah, you don't trade Coleman in that way. Unless, of course, you were able to get Dez Bryant locked up long term. Because of then sure, you trade Coleman. Because, I mean, you got Callaway, who you just drafted, who I think is going to be a decent receiver. But either way, looking at it, I mean, I think the Browns got a good team right now, and I don't think I've ever said that in my life. But there's the whole thing, if you bring on Dez Bryant, is that doing too much? Look at the Eagles. That one year they brought on Vince Young, Nnamdi Asomugha, and a bunch of other big-name players. How did they do? Vince Young called them the dream team. That didn't really work out, did it? No, it did not. I don't think that Vince Young even played after that season going forward. And I mean, that team went 8-8. You look at the Dolphins, who were offseason champs from like 2013 to 2014. What did that do for them? Not a thing. Not a thing at all. All they did was miss out on the playoffs again. And then you got the Rams this season. I think the Rams, as far as being offseason champs, it's a little bit different. Rams filled some needs. Rams had a need at quarterback. They picked up Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib. Rams needed a number 1 receiver. What did they do? They traded for Brandon Cooks. The only thing the Rams really didn't need was another defensive tackle, but either way, they go out and get a Ndamukong Suh. And with the Browns, you've added Tyrod Taylor, Jarvis Landry. You got Josh Gordon, who's going to be coming into his first full season. You don't want to bring in too many faces, because eventually it's going to be a problem. It always is. Winning the offseason is not a good thing, and it never has been. So that's why I do think Dez Bryant would be a decent fit in Cleveland. But there's a point where you don't want to do too much. Right now, I think their receiving corps is fine the way it is. I think they have they have a top 5 receiving corps as of right now. But of course, I mean, there is the point that, the Browns have been absolutely terrible for 20 years. You got to do whatever you can to start putting wins on the board. I mean, you got those Cleveland Browns fans, bless their heart, out there buying tickets, selling out the stadium week in and week out to watch this team win one game over the last 2 seasons. And I'm assuming 1998 and on, I doubt that they have more than 30 wins. That's a bit. I'd say I doubt they have more than 40 wins over 20 years. And that's something maybe I need to check. It'd be a nice little stat to look at. But either way, yeah. Maybe bringing on Dez Bryant, it does make you a better team. And I mean, it's just another weapon for Tyrod Taylor to throw to. So I'm not opposed to Dez Bryant going to the Browns. I think it'd be a nice little fit there. And they'd by far have the best receiving corps in the league if they added Dez Bryant. It's just a point where you don't want to add too many guys because it usually never works out when you try to do too much. So we'll see if they end up doing it. I mean, John Dorsey's the one who basically said that, yeah, we got interest in Dez Bryant. You got Josh Gordon, who's missing training camp right now. Not sure when he's going to be back. Obviously, if Gordon's going to be missing, you're going to need another receiver. And who better than Dez Bryant? I mean, I figured, too, that Dez Bryant, if he was going to be getting picked up, it'd be at training camp. There's no reason to pick him up before that. So we'll see if the Browns are the team that gets him. But either way, it's going to be interesting. So we're going to wrap it up here. Next up, we're going to be talking about Aaron Donald holding out. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. We spent that first segment talking about Dez Bryant and the possibility of him becoming a Cleveland Brown. I'd like to see it. I mean, it's about time that the Browns actually field a halfway decent team. So, why not, huh? But either way, now we move on. We got players holding out. We talked about Julio Jones yesterday. And now we got Aaron Donald officially holding out. Aaron Donald, I mean, I'm not there at the LA Rams facilities. I'm not sure what their contract negotiations are looking like, but if I had to assume, I'm assuming that Aaron Donald isn't a very happy man. And you ask, why do you say that, Jesse? Jesse says that because you got Brandon Cooks, a man who has never played one down for the Rams. He signed with them, or got traded to the Rams. Rams gave him an extension. Aaron Donald's been waiting for an extension since last season. Hasn't gotten it yet. Aaron Donald is the best defensive tackle in football. You got the Rams also, who decided it would be a good idea to give Ndamukong Suh $14 million guaranteed to come play defensive tackle for their team. If I'm not mistaken, the Rams run a 3-4 defense. So someone's not going to be playing in their spot. All right, meaning no one's going to be hitting the bench between Donald and Sue, but someone's going to have to play somewhere else on the outside. All right. And, I mean, I don't understand them picking up Sue. I mean, of course, it does make you more of a contender, but I don't think you really needed Ndamukong Suh. But more power to him. And then you look at it yesterday, Todd Gurley ended up getting a contract extension. $45 million guaranteed. And Aaron Donald continues to sit there and basically say, hey, what about me? All right. And what about Aaron Donald? When is he going to get his deal? Is he going to get his deal? We talked about it yesterday. It makes more sense for me, at least, to extend Gurley than it does for Aaron Donald. If Aaron Donald was to leave this Rams team, do they get worse to the point where they're taking off a couple of wins? I'm not too sure about that. I think that you lose Aaron Donald, you are still a good team and you're still going to win ball games. I mean, of course, I don't know. I'd say, yeah. I don't think it'd be, like, obviously there'd be a difference with him not being there. But it's a point where, I mean, it wouldn't keep the Rams out of the playoffs or anything like that. And you look at these defensive tackles, they're making what quarterbacks make. Or at least what Sam Bradford makes, and that's $20 million. If you're the Rams, do you really want to pay Aaron Donald what quarterbacks make? I'm not very sure about that. All right. If Aaron Donald, like, does he affect the wins and losses aspect? We talked about this yesterday. I'm not too sure he does. Sure, the guy is going to go out and stop the run, get in the backfield, cut him up a couple of sacks and all that. But either way, is that going to get you a win? Or is that just the player playing well? All right. Basically, my point is he going to change the game for the Rams the same way a quarterback would if you're going to pay him all that money? I don't think so. Okay. And I mean, it's up to the Rams if they want to pay him. I would not be opposed to them paying him either. Let me just say that. Dude's best defensive tackle in the league. I'm assuming so. If you're a general manager, you want the best player at his position on your team. So, I think that what Aaron Donald needs to do is basically hold out and not play until they pay him. All right. And, I mean, the Rams would have to at that point. Or would they? You do have Ndamukong Suh there, who is the second best defensive tackle in football. And if the Rams don't get the Super Bowl this year, it's a failed season. We can agree on that. I mean, you had Cooks, you had Talib, you had Peters, you had Suh, you have Gurley there, Goff, Woods, Cooper Kupp, solid offensive line, great defense. Where is the excuse as to why they won't win it this year? There shouldn't be one. Their goal is to win it, and if they don't, I think it's a failed season. I mean, it might seem harsh on the expectations, but when you go and add guys like that, of course, that's to win a Super Bowl. So we'll see what ends up happening. But as far as Aaron Donald holding out, I'm not showing up till week 1, and I might even miss some regular season games if I'm him. I think he's got until week 8 if he doesn't play past, or if he doesn't play, if week 8 comes and he doesn't play. I believe he doesn't make his money for that contract year, so I doubt that happens. But either way, I think Donald should hold out at least till week 1. Because fact of the matter is, I'm not even sure the Rams are going to want to pay this guy. And if you're Aaron Donald, you do not want to get injured in training camp when you're the best defensive tackle in football and you're up for a new contract next season. I mean, that would be tragic right there. So we'll see what ends up happening with Aaron Donald. I mean, if I had to make my pick, I say that the Rams do end up paying him. And then eventually they're going to have to worry about how much they're going to have to give Goff. But either way, yeah, if I'm him, I'm not coming back till week 1. And even then, so I might take a couple of games off too. And then we also got Khalil Mack, who is holding out. Khalil Mack in the last year of his rookie deal. Probably the best defensive end. I don't know, is Khalil Mack considered an outside linebacker, like a 3-4 type linebacker? Or is he a defensive end? Either way, he's one of the best at whatever position they have him at. And I think that deal should get done pretty easily. I think if the Raiders are smart, which they haven't always been, and I saw recently they fired their radio guy, Greg Papa. I mean, I don't understand that. It seems like him and Mark Davis had their problems, I guess, and that's why he ended up getting fired. But either way, that's probably one of the most more iconic voices in radio. I mean, I'm not a Raider fan or anything like that, but if I had to turn on the radio to listen to it, I'm going to enjoy it. Why? Because Greg Papa's good at what he does. But of course, I mean, Mark Davis, he don't care. Mark Davis is moving that team to Vegas. You think Al Davis would have moved the Raiders to Vegas? I don't know. But either way, yeah, I'm sure the Raiders are going to be paying Khalil Mack. I don't think that holdout's going to last too long. I mean, if the Raiders are smart, which I'm assuming they will be, it'll get done. Unlike a certain Atlanta Falcon who is holding out right now. I mean, can you imagine holding out with 3 years left on your deal? Why? You're not getting paid. You're not getting a raise if you're Julio Jones. I mean, this is an awful holdout. But nonetheless, I'm sure that he got Julio Jones' agent tell him, oh yeah, you should hold out. We'll get more money that way. Sure you will. Julio's going to be back in a week, I think. At least he'll be back before the first preseason game. Yeah, I'll call that. He'll be back before the first preseason game. But other than that, I mean, he's not getting a pay raise. If I'm the Falcons, I'm calling his bluff big time. Julio's mad at the fact that now he's not the highest paid receiver and he doesn't have any more guaranteed money left in his contract. Whose fault is that? Oh yeah, it's your agent's fault. Don't get mad at the Falcons because they finessed you. I mean, come on now. So, we'll see what ends up happening with all these holdouts. Like I said, you got Donald holding out. I mean, if I'm him, I'm not showing up till week 1. Khalil Mack is holding out. He'll get paid soon. Julio Jones is holding out for absolutely no reason. I mean, it was reported that the Falcons were willing to work on his deal next offseason. So, if I was him, I'd wait till then. But I guess not. All right. And as far as the Rams go, I mean, like I said, Super Bowl or bust for them. Anything other than a Super Bowl is failed season. Even if they make it to the NFC Championship and they lose on the last second Hail Mary. I mean, how would that happen, right? Imagine if the Saints and Vikings played each other and there was only a couple seconds left and the Vikings somehow won on a last second play like that. That'd be crazy. Yeah, it happened last year. All right. But yeah, the Rams, they got a lot of good players, but they need to go to the Super Bowl. And if they don't, we'll laugh because they added all these players. And I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, Ndamukong Suh's only on a 1-year deal. Aaron Donald's deal expires after this season. You can't let both of them go. You're going to have to keep one. And I'm assuming it's going to be Donald, so we'll see if that deal ends up getting done. And as for the Raiders, like I said, there's no way that they don't extend Khalil Mack, so I'm sure he won't be out for much longer. But either way, we're going to wrap it up here. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Andrew Luck, so stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. We spent these first two segments talking about Dez Bryant, the Cleveland Browns, and players who are currently holding out. Now, we head over to Indianapolis, where they never really do well to build an actual decent team all around, but they do know how to draft their quarterbacks. Do they know how to keep them healthy? Of course not. It's Indianapolis. Of course, you know I'm talking about Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck is, when healthy and playing to the best of his ability, a top 5 quarterback. And I don't think anyone really disagrees with that. I mean, there shouldn't be anyone who does. And if there is, I mean, that's your opinion, I guess. But now, we've gotten to the point where Andrew Luck, I mean, it seems like I haven't watched him play in forever, when in reality, he just missed one season. The year before that, he played 15 games. Since then, been dealing with shoulder injury complications and all that. And now it's looking like he will be playing in that first preseason game. For him to, if he does play in that first preseason game, is huge. Because that means he's good to go, ready to go, 100%. Let's get it going. And I'm curious about this Colts team. On paper, you take away Andrew Luck, they look terrible. I mean, you got Christine Michael, who has seemingly built a career on this year being his year. Meaning he's the guy where, oh yeah, he's going to have a breakout season this year. Oh yeah, he's going to have a breakout season this year. Okay, no, next year. All right, the dude's played 6 NFL seasons. He's coming into a 6th season. Okay. So, it's interesting, but nonetheless, I don't think he'll be taking the starting job. I don't even think he was on a team last season. I think Marlon Mack's going to end up being the starting running back for that team. But either way, point I'm trying to make here is, can Andrew Luck get back to the form where he's out here making other players look a whole lot better than they usually would? I mean, I'd say the Colts teams with Andrew Luck, when they made the playoffs the first 3 years, weren't the most talented. I think it was just a point where Andrew Luck was good enough to where he could get them there. I mean, you see them back in 2014, I believe it was, make it all the way to the AFC Championship game. Then they end up playing the New England Patriots. Remember that game? I think it was the beginning of the Deflategate right there. New England ends up beating them up. What was it? 44-7? 45-7? And, I mean, the biggest story from that game was Deflategate, but we don't talk about the fact that the Colts' rush defense was atrocious. I don't think we talk enough about that for that game. It's not like Tom Brady was lighting them up. It was LeGarrette Blount, if I'm not mistaken. But now we shift over to 2007, 2018. Andrew Luck still got it? It's a nice little question there. Because we could get Andrew Luck back, and he could still be a good quarterback, but there's the point of, is he going to come back good enough to make the players around him better? Because if not, if it's just Andrew Luck, like you tell Andrew Luck's still a good quarterback, but these other guys are just terrible, they're not going to win more than 3 games this season. They need Andrew Luck to basically be the savior for this team. Basically, if he throws it to whoever, they're going to come up with it. The Peyton Manning effect. If Peyton Manning isn't Marvin Harrison's quarterback, I'd say chances are Marvin Harrison isn't a Hall of Famer. And dare I say it, might be a bit of a hot take, but I think I'd take Reggie Wayne over Marvin Harrison. And that might be a hot take. Let me see. What has Reggie Wayne ever done? He's only made 1 All-Pro team, 6 Pro Bowls, but like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Pro Bowl. He got drafted in 2001. That's crazy how I didn't even realize he was drafted that early in the millennium or whatever. I thought he was more guy who was drafted like 05 or something like that. But no, he was in the league for a while. Played about 14 years. Let's see, his best season was back in 2007, I'm assuming, where he caught 104 passes for 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. Let's compare him. Let's compare Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. And I know Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning got one of the most touchdowns. Got the most. I think they're top 5 for most touchdowns ever between that duo. So let's see. I think Montana Rice is also in there too. Marvin Harrison came into the league back in '96. Marvin Harrison's best season. Marvin Harrison was actually really good. 2002, he caught 143 passes for 1,700 yards, 11 touchdowns. But I don't know. I'd say Marvin Harrison probably had the 2 better seasons, but maybe Reggie Wayne was more consistent. But I guess you could go with either one, but I'll go with Reggie Wayne. So now, like I said, we're at the point where what kind of Andrew Luck should we expect here? And I think that's just $1 million question. Let me pull up the Colts schedule and see exactly what we're working with. I know they play Cincinnati. Yeah, they play Cincinnati week 1. Week 2, they got the Redskins. Week 3, they got the Eagles. Week 4, they got the Texans. Week 5, they got the Patriots. I mean, it doesn't get any more difficult than that. Patriots and Eagles played in the Super Bowl. Texans, if Deshaun Watson doesn't get hurt, have a good chance of making the playoffs. Redskins are going to be a whole lot better than they were last year, this year, I'd say. And the Bengals, I mean, you got Marvin Lewis saying they could be a Super Bowl contender. I mean, that's great and all, Marvin, but you don't know how to win playoff games. So then they got the Jets after the Patriots, then the Bills. Then they'll be playing the Raiders, Jaguars, Titans. Then they got the Dolphins, Jaguars once again. Then the Texans, Cowboys, Giants, and Titans. So they don't really have too easy of a schedule. So if they want to do anything this season, then Andrew Luck's got to be the old Andrew Luck. You can't just be having it where he's just a good quarterback now. He's got to be a top 5 quarterback for this team to go anywhere. Last year with Jacoby Brissett, they won 4 games. And I mean, you could probably argue that those 4 games, they didn't even deserve to win all of those. Okay. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes from this team. I mean, they've had a bit of an odd offseason. Let's not forget that a certain Josh McDaniels was supposed to become their head coach. He eventually gets cold feet. I think that Josh McDaniels ended up coming back to New England because Bill Belichick might have told him something like, I'll be gone in a couple of years and you could take over after that. Kind of like what Bill Parcells did to Bill Belichick, except I don't think it really worked out that way. So that happened, and obviously they ended up signing Frank Reich away from Philly. But you look at it, Frank Reich wasn't their first chance, or for their first choice. And let's not forget that the Colts already had their offensive coordinators and defensive coordinator signed. And then McDaniel said no. You brought in a head coach who wasn't able to choose his coordinators. That might be a problem this season. So, I mean, as far as Indy goes, I think they'll get to 8 wins, and I think that's a decent season considering the fact that Andrew Luck has been gone for so long. But either way, now I'm just curious to see what Andrew Luck we're going to see. And, I mean, he's coming off of a shoulder injury. Those are terrible for quarterbacks. That's like tearing an Achilles if you're a receiver or a cornerback or even a running back. So now, I guess we just wait and see. And if I had to go numbers, I say Andrew Luck goes 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns. Let's go 14 picks. That's my prediction for him this season. But I'm excited to see him playing once again. I mean, he had the Colts playing well once he was out there. But of course, I mean, they refused to build an offensive line around him, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why he ended up getting hurt. The Colts have never really been good at drafting or building a team. They just drafted Manning. He won them games for however many years, and they got lucky getting luck. And that's no pun intended either. So, we'll see what ends up happening, but either way, we're going to wrap it up here. Next up, I will be talking about anything else going on in the world of football, so stay tuned, and I will be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. So far today, we've talked about Dez Bryant, Aaron Donald, and Andrew Luck. Now, we move on, and we talk about anything else going on in the NFL, or anything that comes to my mind. And, we get 49ers news. Richard Sherman says that his Achilles is 100%. That's great and all. I'm not sure how much I believe in Richard Sherman this season. He's a good cornerback, but he's 30. He's a cornerback who's coming off of an Achilles injury. Those don't mix. And it's going to be real interesting to see how well he does with the 49ers this season. I'm not really going to be watching Richard Sherman all season, but I will be paying attention when he plays the Seahawks those two games. I'd say against the Seahawks this season, he'll probably end up with 2 or 3 interceptions. But, if the guy is 100% and he can move the way he used to, then this is a win-win deal for the 49ers. Because Richard Sherman is a top 10 cornerback. And with the 49ers defense right now, they're real young. But either way, a couple more years in development, and they'll probably end up being top 5. So it's going to be interesting to see how Richard Sherman does this season. Again, the Achilles injury kind of scares me, given the fact that he's also 30. And he's played in Seattle's system his whole career. Let's see how well he can do with San Francisco. But I'm sure it'll be fine, so we'll see about it. Let's see anything else going on. Let's talk about the Cowboys real quick. Remember when the Cowboys went 13-3 and Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott's rookie year? Then they ended up losing to the Packers because Aaron Rodgers made a crazy throw and Mason Crosby ended up kicking the game-winning field goal. Do you remember that, Cowboys fans? The Cowboys, man. They've had bad luck with the Packers in the playoffs. First, the whole Dez Bryant thing, which I do think that Dez Bryant caught it. And I will continue to say that. He caught the ball, took a few steps, knee hits, stretches the ball out, and then it comes loose once it hits the ground. That's not a catch. Come on now. But either way, yeah, they went 13-3 that year. Last year, Ezekiel Elliott gets suspended for 6 games, and Dak Prescott looks like he forgot how to play quarterback. It was brutal watching him. I remember that Thanksgiving game that they played against the Chargers. It was ugly. The uniforms are on point. You got the powder blues and the Cowboys Thanksgiving ones. But either way, Dak Prescott looked lost without Ezekiel Elliott last season for those 6 games. Ezekiel Elliott came back for the end of the season. They nearly made the playoffs. I think they finished, 9-7? Basically, the point I'm trying to get at here is, what are the Cowboys going to do this season? I'm not sure they're going to be too good. You look at that secondary, not great at all. I'd say it's probably bottom of the league, near there. And as for their receivers, like I said, bunch of number 2 guys there. Terrence Williams always just been the guy that played opposite of Dez Bryant. Cole Beasley's a real solid slot receiver. I'll give him that. And then I'm assuming you're going to be having Michael Gallup and Allen Hurns competing for the number 1 job, which I'm assuming is going to end up going to Allen Hurns. Allen Hurns was never the number 1 option with Jacksonville. Allen Robinson missed the entire season, and Hurns didn't even take advantage of that this past season. I mean, the Cowboys are taking a risk here. And I think if they don't end up making the playoffs this season, then you got to get rid of Jason Garrett. I mean, unless the Cowboys are just perfectly fine with mediocrity. People point out, oh, Jason Garrett made the playoffs twice. That's cool. It's what, 2 and 8 seasons? Great. What did he do? Marvin Lewis has made the playoffs every year, never gotten far. We don't really think he should. I think he should be gone already too. All right. But with Jason Garrett, I mean, I think he's just at a point where he's a yes man for Jerry Jones, and that's why Jerry hasn't really gotten rid of him yet. I mean, can you really tell me that Jason Garrett has done anything real notable with the Cowboys since he's been there? I mean, I remember more Jason Garrett. I mean, he hasn't made the most of his opportunities with this team, coaching this team. And I think it's just a point where if he was the guy, the head coach for that team, like the guy who was going to lead them, get them to the playoffs all the time, then we would have knew that already. Hasn't been the case. I feel like we're still waiting to see what Jason Garrett can do with this team, and that's ridiculous because, like I said, he's been around for 8 seasons almost, I feel. There's a point where making the playoffs every couple of years isn't great. This Cowboys team's got 5 total Super Bowls. Since the 90s, they've done nothing. I think it's time that the Cowboys eventually return back to being a respectable team in the NFL, meaning making the playoffs regularly. I mean, they're talked up as America's team and all that, but that's just about it. They don't do anything special. And, I mean, when you got Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott, you're going to be fine, but there's just a point where there's a whole lot of good teams in this NFC. I'd say the Buccaneers are the only truly bad team right now. All right, and let me check the Cowboys' schedule. They got the Panthers week 1 in Carolina, the Giants week 2 in Dallas. That's like an automatic loss right there since it's on Sunday night and in Dallas. Then they got to play in Seattle. They got Detroit. Then they got the Texans, the Jags, Redskins, Titans, Eagles, Falcons, Redskins, Saints, Eagles, Colts, Buccaneers, Giants to finish off the season. I mean, how many good passing teams are going to be going against? I'd say Carolina and Giants are 1 and 2. Detroit 3. Texans 4. Eagles 5. Falcons 6. Saints 7. Colts 8. Then you got to play the Giants twice or whatever, like the Eagles. I mean, that secondary is going to get shredded all season long. And, I mean, that's cool if you're Dallas. You got Ezekiel Elliott back. You're scoring 30 points, but it's obviously not going to work out when you're giving up 31. So, I don't really believe in the Cowboys this season. I'm not saying they're a bad team. They're just not good enough to compete in the NFC right now. And, I mean, that would just constitute them as going backwards. 13-3 one year, 9-7 the next. Miss out on the playoffs again. You're telling me they're going to be bringing back Jason Garrett? Get out of here. There's no way. And if they do, it's an awful decision to do. So, we'll see what ends up happening with Dallas this season. I mean, if it's, you know what I'm most looking forward to with Dallas this season is Dak Prescott. Because I will give him a pass because we usually do see quarterbacks in their second season tend to have a down year. But it's the third season where you really find out what exactly you got with your quarterback. And if Dak Prescott looks like how he did last season, then Dallas has no chance at doing anything. At least for this upcoming season. I mean, like I said, the dude looked completely lost when Ezekiel Elliott wasn't out there basically running the ball for him. So, it'll be real interesting to see how Dallas does this season. Like I said, they got a real tough schedule, and plus the rest of the NFC is very good. I mean, this could be a year in the NFC where we see an 8-8 or 7-9 team make it into the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be real balanced this season. So, who knows how it'll end up going. I mean, we got preseason coming up. We'll see how these players are looking, seeing what these rookies are looking like. So, it's going to be real interesting, real exciting. But, nonetheless, I mean, that's all I got to say about that. So, we're going to wrap it up here. Today, we talked about the Cleveland Browns and the possibility of them bringing in Dez Bryant. I think that'd be a good move. We talked about Aaron Donald. If I'm him, I'm holding out till week 1. Third segment, we talked about Andrew Luck. Can he get this team to the playoffs even with that weak roster? And then for this segment, we talked about the Cowboys. So thanks for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. As always, I am your host, Jesse Tapia. I will be back tomorrow, so stay tuned, and I will talk to you guys later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.